just to me sounds like a male-made decision.
So you think his complaint sounds sort of silly, in a way?
I feel like there's other more important issues to deal with.
Okay, all right. Well, he brought the complaint, so I assume you don't think it's silly. Why don't you tell us what you've done?
Can I just touch on some of her biology part? I mean, you talk about on the biology aspect that you have to go through the pain and suffering of the period. Well, most men have to go through pain and suffering of prostatitis. And prostatitis doesn't end when they're 45 or when they're 50. There's no menopause for prostatitis. It continues until they die, no matter how long they live. And that pain is excruciating. I used to play rugby, I've thrown out my knee, but there's no pain as excruciating as prostatitis. And also, as far as giving birth, I mean, you are built to give birth. That's part of the function. That's how Mother Nature built your body to do one thing, among others, and that is birth. So if you don't use a Volkswagen, which would be a guy, to drive as fast as a Ferrari does. I mean, it's built for that, so I don't see why there's a problem there. And as far as being put on a pedestal, 58,200 and some odd guys died in Vietnam. 8 girls did. 8 girls. From my little town, hometown in New Jersey of 7,500 people, 8 guys from that town died there. And most of the guys, or 40% of the guys who died in Vietnam, were drafted. They didn't want to go there.
Now tell us what you're doing with your
Okay, as far as the ladies' night.
And let me just interrupt for 1 second. I did think that Flavia, to be fair, did say that pregnancy was a gift. I mean, I didn't think she was spinning it in a one-sided way.
Okay.
She did, but tell us what you're doing with the lawsuits that you've been bringing.
I brought 3 lawsuits. They're all in federal court. They're all in the Southern District Court of New York. Each one of the lawsuit emphasizes fairness for men's rights. And each lawsuit was thrown out of the court. The judges in the court simply read the complaints in the lawsuits, and they said, oh, this is my belief is, they said, oh, this is a lawsuit concerning men's rights. It's a lawsuit fighting for men's rights. Let's get rid of it. Let's give these bums the rush out of court.
All right, go through one at a time. Tell us.
I'll go through one at a time. The first one is ladies' nights. And ladies' nights, clubs in New York City charge guys more for admission. For instance, they would charge a guy for $20. They would charge a guy $20 for admission. Girl would get in for $0. Now, if you think about the triviality, the quote triviality of it,
does seem trivial in a way.
It's not trivial, because if you take you have a transfer in wealth from the guy to the girl. Because if the clubs acted non-discriminatory towards guys, they charge $10 for the girl, $10 for the guy. But now they charge $20 for the guy, $0 for a girl. So you have a transfer of wealth. You add up all that wealth by all those guys over all those nights, and you take a future value at, say, the prime interest rate, you have a large chunk of change.
Yeah, but one of the answers to that would be that no one requires a man to go to one of those ladies' nights, so you don't have to transfer wealth. If you don't want to, just don't go. And I do think Flavia has a point in saying that one of the reasons that ladies' nights exist is for men, because it brings women into the clubs. But no man has to go, which is why I don't know that it rises to the level, and I did it too. I filed complaints against ladies' nights. But because it's avoidable, the draft was not. Mm-hmm. Because you don't have to go to a bar, right. Maybe it's not such a serious form of discrimination. Wow. What's your response to that?
I mean, blacks didn't have to go to Lester Maddox restaurant. But if they did go to Lester Maddox restaurant, they choose to act as a free American and go into a public accommodation. These are places of public accommodation. In Lester Maddox's restaurant, they're meet with an axe handler.
Let me just make a comment.
If you go to a public accommodation here in Manhattan, in the New York City nightclub, you're going to pay more. That's the discrimination. It's a public accommodation.
Ladies' night, I feel like, and I've said it, I feel like it's a man-made decision. The war. All these men died at war. And who sent all these men to war? Probably a man sent all these men to war. So I feel like boys get in their own troubles because they are.
I just want to get John in for a second here.
Can I just touch upon that?
Yeah, go ahead. Then I want to get John in.
Tell it to the guys who are pushing up daisies in the Falkland Islands. And tell it to the 2 million more females who voted for Lyndon B. Johnson than guys did.
Yeah, I want to get John in, because I know you have other lawsuits, so we'll get to them. But let me ask you a question, because I think one of the things you have talked about in the past is the role that powerful men play in discriminating against other men. And Flavia touched on that.
Yes, and I was going to get to that. I was leading into that conversation that men are really their own worst enemy. And as Flavia pointed out, that men created the wars and men created these rules. And would I be wrong in saying that there's a part of chivalry, and these judges, they think they're out to protect the women. And do you think that had a role in having your suits thrown out? Because I see it that way, like in family court. Men over the years think that they are the hunter-gatherers. Their chivalry goes beyond their rationale, and they will protect the woman, like in family court.
Especially
as
powerful
opposed to
men. Powerful men do
yes,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah. So is that? I mean, it is true that men do that. Yes.
Well, what I believe has happened in the cases that I brought in court, there were two other cases. The first case, the ladies' night case, had a female judge. The other two cases were a male judge. Now, I think the female judge...
Tell us about the other two cases. So
okay, the female judge was a feminist, the other two were male.
Tell us about the other two cases.
I just wanted to, just a little point on your men start the wars. Not the Boer War, not the first Gulf War, thanks to April Glaspie. And if you even look at World War II and Woodrow Wilson's wife and the play that she had concerning the League of Nations and the U.S. not joining that League of Nations, you have some influence in there. Now, the second case is the case against the Violence Against Women's Act. A little complicated. Let's say a guy marries a foreign girl. Marriage doesn't work out, or perhaps she might have defrauded him or tricked him into marriage. And in that case, he's been tricked into marriage. He's part of being a fool as well. But let's say it doesn't work out. He wants to divorce her. If she's divorced, she then only has three options in order to become a permanent resident. And one is the Violence Against Women's Act, where she simply goes to the federal government and says, my ex-husband, U.S. citizen or still current husband, battered me, subjected me to extreme cruelty, or subjected me to an overall pattern of violence. And immediately when she says that, the federal government holds secret hearings. The guy's not there. The guy doesn't know about it. The guy can't submit evidence. And those secret hearings find the American citizen responsible for battery, extreme cruelty, and overall
So you
pattern of
went to
violence.
court. I assume you allege that there was some lack of due process or something.
Yeah, it was lack of due process.
And what happened in court?
The male judge, who I believe is clearly scared of feminists, threw it out. All these cases were thrown out of the Southern District Court of New York.
Okay. Before we find that common denominator among all the cases, tell us about the third one, because we don't have a lot of time.
Sure. The third case was a suit against Columbia University's Women's Studies program, and to understand the suit is think of Title IX. The judge in this case said there was no injury, but under Title IX requires, which is a federal law, requires that educational institutions provide an equivalent educational opportunity. So if a college has a guys rugby team and girls in that college want to play rugby, they got to have a girls rugby team. Columbia has a women's studies program. I and the other plaintiff are looking for a men's studies program. There's no men's studies program. Therefore, we do not have an equal opportunity under Title IX.
All right. And let me ask you a devil's advocate question about
Sure.
this before. Look, I'm not a fan of the free market, but it does seem to me that universities operate in what is essentially a free market. And I'll tell you a story, Roy. I developed a men's studies syllabus. And I took it with me. I went to the new school, and I went up to the sociology department, and I went up to see the chairwoman of the department, and I said, I have this men's studies syllabus. I want to teach this class. And she said to me, it's about time. Where have you been? And she put it in the catalog for the next semester, and no one signed up. Men didn't sign up to take the class. Isn't it fair to say that if men and women wanted to take a men's studies course, then the colleges would offer it, and when they don't offer it, because there's not that interest in it?
No, I don't think that's the reason, because what I found in talking to some people at Columbia University, that there is an interest in it. Now, I have an interest in it, my plaintiff has an interest in it. And under Title IX, Columbia University can simply put out a survey. U.S. Department of Education puts together these surveys to measure the interest of people in a university for a program. All the Columbia University has to do is put out that survey. If there's no interest there, then it can argue there's no reason for the program, but it hasn't done that.
Okay, it hasn't
I
done it.
could appreciate the legal aspects, but there's other very subtle ways of discrimination. And being a labor leader at this moment, I could tell you I've seen, and in the history of myself, working for a certain blue chip company when I was much younger, and took great pride in my technical prowess, if you will. And on the scene, all of a sudden, what was predominantly a male service organization